Want to sell more books? Make sure you're at the Self-Publishing Show live this summer. Meet the biggest names in self-publishing at Europe's largest conference for independent authors. Enjoy 2 days packed with special guests, an exclusive networking event, and a digital ticket for watching the professionally filmed replay, including bonus sessions not included at the live show. Head over to selfpublishingshow.com/tickets and secure your spot now. The Self-Publishing Show Live is sponsored by Amazon KDP.
On this edition of the Self-Publishing Show,
you get to curate and create this story. So it's not about divulging every personal thing that's ever happened to you, but it's about drawing threads, your passion, your motivation for writing. Why has it led you to write what you're writing? And then using examples from your personal life to illustrate that.
publishing is changing. No more gatekeepers, no more barriers, no one standing between you and your readers. Do you want to make a living from your writing? Join indie bestseller Mark Dawson and first-time author James Blatch as they shine a light on the secrets of self-publishing success. This is the Self-Publishing Show. There's never been a better time to be a writer.
Hello and welcome to the Self-Publishing Show with me, James Blatch.
And me, Mark Dawson.
Hey, Mark Dawson. We are recording this on a Thursday for the following week. So it's going to be something like June the 8th, I guess, do my maths. And that means we're just a couple of weeks away from the Self-Publishing Show live. Are you excited?
Yeah, so we're getting into the nitty-gritty now. So kind of slides are coming in from presenters. I'm thinking about what I'm doing I'll be involved a couple of times on stage thinking about what I'm going to do with that. I had a call with some academics this morning about a survey that we're working on with the Alliance of Independent Authors, working on something to do with a survey that they did that we're going to be discussing at the show. So that's going to be interesting. We're going to send out some press releases and see if we can get some journalists to come down and kind of realize that it's not all doom and gloom as an author these days. So looking forward to that. Dinner's being arranged, sponsors coming to have dinner. I've got some people coming down to the house to have dinner with me the Sunday before. Ricardo from Reedsy and Dan Wood from Draft Digital, Joanna Penn, a few others. So that's going to be fun. But yeah, it's busy and the sun is shining. It's we're starting to get into summer now. And I don't think the long range forecast is out yet, but if we get this kind of weather for the 20th and 21st, like we did last year, it's going to be great.
Well, I hope so. It's been miserable here. The weather's been miserable. I mean, Catherine, who works on this show, went to the West Country last week and said they all came back burned. And we've had
it's quite warm here.
It's been cold and grey every day. So the west of Britain's doing well. So I'm hoping the weather's going to get better.
Yeah.
Wimbledon's around the corner. It's June, for goodness sake. It needs to be summer now.
Yes, exactly.
Good. Yeah, very excited. So we had 100 tickets held back because we weren't sure whether we might need COVID spacing or for whatever reason. So we are going to release those in the next couple of weeks. So you should be able to grab a ticket if you would like to come. If you don't have one yet, selfpublishingformula.com/SPS live. And you can also just come along to the party if you want. I think that's an option now on there. Looking forward to it. Lots to do between now and then, of course, but there always is. Now, we are going to be talking about author branding in a moment, but I just want to mention a couple of things. AI is fast developing, and you and I are both quite experimenting, I suppose, with how it can help us. And there are sort of various ways it's time saving and helping us with various little bits and pieces. One thing I've discovered yesterday is the Photoshop beta, which has something called generative fill built into it, will expand an image out. So if you've got a small part of an image, for instance, the front cover of your book, the bit that doesn't have text over it, you can actually use Photoshop to create a, let's say, 1200 by 628 version of that. And it just creates the rest of, if it's a lawn with a stately home in the background, it creates the rest of the stately home and the rest of the lawn. It's absolutely astonishing. And if you check out my TikTok from last night, the 31st of May, I actually posted Midjourney's version of the characters from my first novel, The Final Flight, and they were expanded out from what Midjourney, which is an AI bot, produced in Photoshop, and I'm using that same technology to create ad images for my books and the books we market in Fuse. So that's a really exciting thing. Perhaps do some live training at some point on that. We're thinking about what we're going to do for AI. Mark, I know you use it to help you not use the same words over and over again sometimes, and to help it task save and time save and on stuff.
Yeah, so I kind of keep away from the actual writing. I can't really ever imagine me using it too extensively for that, because that's kind of, I love writing, so I don't know why I'd subcontract that to something else. But it has been useful in some time-saving ways. So kind of just one, for example, I did a campaign for Atticus at the moment. So obviously Atticus is getting quite a lot of sales right now because it's a Rich and Judy title. Which reminds me, I did an interview with Rich and Judy yesterday. I mentioned about it, which was hilarious. But so I told it what the book was about. I fed the blurb into it, gave it a few kind of comparative authors, and just asked it to generate a Facebook campaign for me. And so it came back with 5 variations on the headline, 5 variations on the copy text. And then I asked it for targetable interests. So, rather than me going into the ads manager and saying, okay, is David Baldacci targetable? Obviously, I know that he is, but is the other authors similar to me in that space, are they available as targets I can go after on Facebook with Facebook ads? And it gave me 10, and I said, well, I can have some more. So it gave me another 10, and they were all targetable. So it knew, I don't quite know how, but it knew which ones I could use as interests. And so it put the campaign together for me. Obviously, I've had to do a bit of tweaking, and the copy's not quite right as it stands, but it's not bad as a starting point. I put that up, and it's probably completely coincidental, and things have changed a little bit over the course of the last 7 days, but I started getting 7-cent clicks, which are very, very low for an account with as much kind of historical spend as mine. It's quite hard to get it down that low. It's gone up now to about 15 cents, 16 cents, but it's still good. And yeah, it did all of that in about 30 seconds, which is like, okay, that was useful. So yeah, I think the kind of the helping with things about the business there's a lot of value there already. And there are other ways too that I think others are using it and others will use it. So it's exciting,
Yeah, it's a fast changing area. So, you can save yourself some money on VA services and then do stuff that you don't like doing. That old Becca Syme thing. Do you remember Becca Syme? Focus on what you're good at. Yeah. So if you don't like writing copy for adverts, you don't like writing the blurb, let ChatGPT or whatever AI you use start the process, and then you can, at least it helps with that. And the imaging stuff is terrific. I'm still mind blown at how quickly and easily it does stuff that I just don't have the Photoshop skills to smoothly clone existing images and increase their size. I did speak to Stuart Bache about it, obviously, first of all, ethically, because I was using images that I'd paid for from him. How does he feel about me using them in Photoshop? And I'll let him talk about that at some point. We'll have a discussion about this for sure at the Self-Publishing Show live. But he says it's a bit glitchy, but there's definitely scope for authors being able to do a lot of those tasks and make the most of the images you get from your designer. But I would check with your designer first.
Yes,
that they are happy
just
with
because
that.
Stuart is happy doesn't mean everyone will be. So I mean, it's very fast moving, and people have different opinions on this, which we see all the time. And whenever we mention AI, and I know Joanna Penn, who mentions it much more frequently than we do, has basically stopped looking or stopped replying or responding to the negative comments, and there are lots of them. And I've seen it too. We had an ad for a blog post which we had on the site 2 or 3 weeks ago about AI and how it could help authors, and just some vituperative comments from people, saying you're cutting your own throat effectively. And I understand their position. I don't necessarily agree with it, but what are you going to do? It's it's out of the bottle now. You can't put it back.
It is, and we are not talking about using AI to write a book or plot a book. Even I could probably toss some ideas around, but I think they need to come from you. So that's not what we're talking. We're talking about marketing and running a business and using AI in all sorts of ways to help with that. But that doesn't mean other people aren't going to be writing books using AI.
No, they already are, and
Yeah.
I'm seeing some tweets from fairly senior figures in the kind of in the Society of Authors recently about complaining about, I just moaning the fact that it's, it's a dangerous time to be an author, and it's challenging, but it's always been challenging. It's one thing after the other. It's kind of okay, self-publishing, traditional publishing, Kindle Unlimited, no Kindle Unlimited, different platforms, audiobooks. There's always something, and generally. And I've been doing this for 10 years now. Generally, it feels like the sky is falling down, and then we figure out a way to use it.
Yes.
Use whatever it is properly and protecting our position. And I suspect it will be the same for this, unless, of course, they get the launch codes. In which case, it won't matter. So,
yeah. Hey, ChatGPT, what are the launch codes and where can I get them?
Do you want to play a game?
Yeah.
Thermonuclear war.
That was a great film.
It was a great film.
Okay, all right. Look, let's park that discussion for now. We will be talking AI a lot, I think, over future weeks as we explore it, make the sense of it, and hopefully give some guidance on it. And we'll put together some materials in SPF, as we always do, on these up-and-coming subjects. Right, for now, let's turn our attention to Isabelle Knight, who is our interviewee today. Isabelle is a former publicist in film, television, and books. Worked about 20 years in that industry. She worked with J.K. Rowling on a Strike series to adapt them for television. She worked with trad publishers and now working with indie publishers. And her thing is that the author must have a brand, and there's a story about every author. You might not think you have a story. You might not think readers are interested, but they are. It helps sell your books. It helps sell you, which helps sell your books. So let's talk to Isabelle. Then Mark and I will be back for a quick chat at the end of the interview.
This is the Self-Publishing Show. There's never been a better time to be a writer.
Isabelle Knight, welcome to the Self-Publishing Show.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Glad to have you along. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see some lovely sort of almost Japanese-esque screens behind you. bit of
yeah.
colour to the day. Okay, look,
Yes.
you're here in the UK with us. We're going to be talking about book publicity. I guess you are a book publicist. Is that what you'd call yourself?
Well, confusingly, I call myself an author brand expert and mentor. So I was a publicist for about 20-ish years in film, TV, and books. Authors out there will have heard of the most notable name I worked with, which was J.K. Rowling.
Wow.
On her Strike series. So she wrote the detective novels based on the detective Strike. And I essentially worked with the production and the BBC. We adapted those for TV. So that was my kind of central role in that project. But yes, so I've worked with traditionally published authors and now self-published authors. So I tend to say to people, I won't do your publicity for you, but I will show you how to do it. And I'll kind of guide you through it step by step.
Sounds like the indie way, which is what we like. Empowering people to do it themselves. And of course, that fits perfectly with indie authors. And I guess you've found an increasingly more often it's indie authors rather than trad authors coming to you?
Yeah, it is. Although, funnily enough, as I see more indie authors, a few traditional authors are coming out of the woodwork, or people that want to become traditionally published authors as well. So some people are coming to me asking, could I help them to find an agent, for example? Because, as we'll get into, the kind of skills and the tools that you need to publicize yourself as an author are essentially the same as the tools you might need if you are looking for an agent or a traditional publisher, as if you're looking to get press coverage, to pitch yourself to journalists. So I'm working with authors to learn how to pitch themselves. So whether that's to grow their readership, pitching themselves directly to readers or to journalists or to anybody else that might be able to help them to raise their profile.
Yeah, and it's worth pointing out, isn't it, that partly in this day and age when a trad author is an author house is looking at signing a contract with a new author, they will be looking at what work the author's done for for their own brand as part of their decision-making process.
Yes. And this is where, I definitely work with authors who are at that stage of, and a number of the authors I've worked with have gone through the kind of hybrid model as well. So they've either gone into the hybrid model and then discovered that actually they can take control of their process themselves. And I'm, part of what I'm doing is making people feel empowered that they can do that. So if they've gone through one of the hybrid models or, the various models that are out there at the moment, and then understood, they've kind of come full circle and realised that actually if they don't take control of their own marketing and publicity process, then it's going to be very, very difficult for them.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's talk about this, the fundamentals here, the author brand. Yeah. And I think a lot of authors won't really know where to start or what's required of them. But what are you talking about when you talk about your own author brand?
So with the author brand, the very first place I start with all authors, no matter how long they've been writing for, where they are in their journey, is to establish what you're saying about yourself as an author. So I call it your author brand story, which sounds much more fancy than it is. Really, what we're doing is getting you to tell us why you write what you write and who you are as an author, not just telling us what your books are, what your book's about, who you think it's for, but telling us why you wrote that book so that we can understand why nobody else could have written the book you have written at this time, at this moment, in your particular genre, in your space. So it's first of all, getting authors to understand how do they present themselves, because you have to show who you are as an author. And I say this all the time to clients, you can't hide behind your book. The book isn't going to do the talking for you. Books can't speak. We need to know what to say about the book, but about ourselves as authors. When you're completely new to market, if you're an author who hasn't really established a fan base or readership yet, it's especially important to work out, well, who am I as an author? What am I going to say about myself as an author? So this is your author brand story that tells us why you wrote this book and why nobody else could have written it, and what is it about you and your particular personal story that tells us who you are as an author, the unique story of you as an author. So that's kind of in a nutshell what that is.
What I think is really interesting about that is when I was writing my first book, Jenny Nash was the person who took me through the process of the completely muddled first draft and turning that into the released book. And the question she said to me is, why are you writing? Why can you write this book and no one else can? So it was basically the same. She was asking me the same question, but leading to a better book. What story was I trying to tell about me? Why do I need to tell this story? And once I'd worked that out, which was to do with my father, of course, and my history, and I'm already thinking now, I've never really used that in PR terms. I've never used the fact I'm the son of a test pilot. He did the flying and I'm doing the writing. But that's actually quite a nice little brand thing.
Yes. And you've got the picture behind you as well, which
one of his planes. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so already in my mind, I'm already thinking, well, what questions am I going to ask you to tease that story out so that then we can start to relate that? Because people say to me, oh, it's not relevant. It's always relevant. What people see in their own personal story, often you're too close to it yourself to see how actually it's manifesting in your writing, and all the links are there. So your own personal experiences, personal motivations and passions. And actually it's often less about what you've done, but more about what drives you and what motivates you. And we can see that linked to what you write about. And to put it into context then for your kind of author brand and how this then translates to your publicity and marketing is I say to people, if I was going to put you in front of a journalist tomorrow, so the example that you just gave, a journalist would say, so why did you write this book then? That they're not going to, the first question is not going to be, what's the book about? Because that's not the interesting bit. Before we read the book itself, we want to know, why did you write it? And why did you write it?
I can see some authors not liking the idea of this. And they do want to hide behind the book. They don't think they're interesting, or it's got anything to do with or they probably modestly don't think there's anything interesting about them.
Yeah, and loads of people, I get that all the time. Oh, but I don't have a story. I don't have anything interesting about me. Everybody does, because everyone has their own unique story that isn't never going to be exactly the same as anyone else's. And the point here is, obviously I've worked with really famous people. I've worked with really not famous people. And the point is that your story doesn't have to kind of set the whole world on fire. It just has to resonate with your ideal readers. And that's why understanding from your brand story then helps us to understand who your ideal reader is going to be, because it's going to be that person that goes, oh yeah, that's something that they can relate to, that they can be interested in. And it's not because they've got the same story as you necessarily, because no two people are going to have the same, but the way you feel about something, they'll be able to relate to. So your passions and motivations, they'll say, oh yeah, okay, that's me too. So it's only those readers. Yeah. You
mentioned J.K. Rowling. When I think back to it, those early stories about her sitting in a cafe as a single mum writing this book actually did become a very important part of why we bought into J.K. Rowling. And actually, the more we learned about her background, the more moving and poignant that all is. But that's a very good example of someone who probably thinks there's nothing interesting about me. But that was for all of us. It was interesting.
That's right. And it is. And, I'm glad you bring that up, because it's a great example of a brand story that it's stayed with that author. So, she's couldn't be further away from that person that she was when she first started writing the books. Yet we still, to a point, see her as that person, because that brand story has stuck with her. And it's a very ordinary story. There's nothing extraordinary really about, being a single parent, not really having any huge opportunities in front of you and writing in a cafe. I mean, how many authors out there are doing that right now?
Yeah. It almost requires, I think, for a lot of authors, somebody else. I mean, there's obviously you would potentially in a professional relationship be that person, but they almost need someone else to tease that out of them, because then you're not necessarily very good at seeing your own stories. I think you alluded to that earlier.
Yeah. And it is really difficult to see your own story. And, authors will hear me talk about this and then they'll go off and have a go at it. But then they'll come back to me and I'll say, okay, well, you've got about half of it there, but I can see that there's other little bits hiding. And so, I talk to them, and essentially what I'm doing is mirroring back what they're telling me. And then we put it into such a way that they end up with a fairly short, concise story, but it tells us so much about who they are and why they're doing this. And it's something that their ideal reader is going to see and go, oh yeah, that's interesting.
Because writers actually should be good at this. This is what we do. We find out what's the story in an ordinary situation. And I was a journalist before I did this, so it was kind of my day job as well. In fact, I'm reminded of Aaron Sorkin talking about when he was handed, he always looks for what is the story here. When he's handed what's the story is not necessarily what he ends up writing about. So when he's handed the story of Facebook, they were going to do a film adaptation of the story of Facebook. And he spent, I think, a year interviewing people, looking around before he found the story. And the story was that Mark Zuckerberg was an arsehole. And that was the story. It's how he characterized it. But that's the story of Facebook. And there's a lot more to it than that. But it took him a year to work that out. Yeah. So again, it's a small personality trait. It sounds a bit rude about Mark Zuckerberg, but that's kind of what that story was.
But it's teasing out, and what we're doing is teasing out the human interest part of it. Because what's more interesting? Oh, I'm making a movie about someone who invented a social media platform. Okay, most of us have already switched off now.
Yeah.
But now I'm making a movie about this guy who actually didn't treat people well and was not well liked, who made a business into a multi-million-pound business. Now we're interested.
Yeah. That's a great example. I think back to The Social Network. I think that very first scene with his girlfriend says, "You're such an arsehole." And it's a real save the cat thing. You should be telling your reader what the theme of the story is in the first scene or so.
Yeah.
But Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so people can, I think, maybe got the idea that they can tease out their story. What do we then do with it?
So then we can do loads of practical things with it. I mean, one of the first things people do when they write this story with me, they'll then put it on their About Me on their website, on their author website, or they might use it in their blurbs, put it on Amazon, that kind of thing. But I always say to people, really kind of own it, like almost practice it so that it becomes a part of you, so that when you're doing your marketing, you're doing your social media, you're writing your newsletters, maybe you're even talking to readers sometimes in real life, or you're speaking somewhere, you're at a book fair, whatever you're doing, it starts to become a fluent thing, so that you stop, because I use this as an example a lot. If you start telling someone the plot of your book, 9 out of 10 people are going to be switching off after the first 30 seconds of that. So you stop doing that and you start telling people why you write, and it becomes a part of you. So it's always been a part of you, but now you're actually using it. And then when you're pitching yourself, so like we said at the beginning, whether it's to a journalist, whether it could be to an agent, it could be to a publisher, whoever it is, you're going first and foremost with that story. So so you've got it down to almost, a couple of lines, and you're always leading with that. So when people come to say, they say, oh, I'm going to write my author information sheet, or I'm going to write a press release, I'm going to pitch myself to this magazine, I'm going to ask, these bloggers to review my book. Well, we're never starting from scratch then. So we've got our author story piece ready. So, people aren't running around and go, oh God, what do I write in my press release? And so I thought, we always start with your story, why are you doing what you're doing? And then everything else flows from there.
It does go back to stories are the sort of human condition, aren't they? The essence of humanity, I think, is stories. And I can imagine if bloggers were at a book fair or something, had a load of authors all day coming to them, but one of them told them the story about being the single mum or having the undemonstrative father or whatever. That's why you remember stuff. So at the end of the day, when they're chatting to each other, it's not what was the plot of that book, was it? So did you meet so-and-so? So that's, I can see this. So I hadn't really thought about it in these terms before. I used to have to think about this stuff all the time for journalism. From my editors would also always be saying, what's the story? Yeah. Where's the beginning, middle and end of this? It's don't just tell me the facts. But I'd never properly applied it to myself, which is... I'm making notes, which is always a good thing in an interview.
Yeah. Well, it's good. I mean, it's a great exercise to do. And then if you wanted to show it to me afterwards, and then I would have more questions for you. But the other thing to stress is, when we see sometimes on social media, people are marketing themselves and they're telling us everything about their lives. And sometimes we're cringing at personal details and we think, oh God, this is all too much. And sometimes authors get scared when they hear me talk about this. They think that's what I'm going to make them do. I'm going to make you say everything about your personal life. Tell us all the, hang out your dirty washing. That is not what I'm doing at all. So it's always a reminder that you get to curate and create this story. So it's not about divulging every personal thing that's ever happened to you, but it's about drawing threads, like we said, your passion, your motivation for writing. Why has it led you to write what you're writing? And then using examples from your personal life to illustrate that. So you can pick examples that, you might be, you'd be comfortable to share that. And you don't have to give the whole thing away. When you're writing a book, often it's what's not said that has the most impact. So it's the same idea. It's kind of, the suggestion of things that gets people interested.
And when we do know stuff about, you mentioned J.K. Rowling, or we mentioned her story, and I don't know, other celebrities, Nikki Campbell was adopted. Is it? I'm starting to think this is not by accident that we know these little tidbits about people, because it helps to fill in and complete them as a brand, and that's quite important in their world of being a personality.
Yes, yeah, and it's giving you a rounded view of that person, and what it does is it makes us feel like we know that person.
Yeah.
Even though we really don't. mean, we really don't know much about J.K. Rowling at all, because she is renowned for almost never giving interviews ever.
I have asked her on the podcast a couple of times, but she hasn't so far not replied.
Yeah. I mean, I worked with her at, high level promotional, and she gave us one interview, and that was, to me and my colleague, it wasn't to a journalist. So it's that sense of feeling like you know someone.
Yeah. And Nikki Campbell, by the way, is a radio presenter in the UK, I should say, for a lot of people listening in America, but it's just an example of someone I knew something personal about them. And I'm starting to think that that these people have probably worked with someone like you in the past. I don't want to be cynical about it, but it is who they are. And it does help us get to know them and buy into them a little bit more than if they were simply unknown to us.
Yes, that's right. And it's the publicist's job to pull out the details that we are going to use and decide the things that we won't say and the things that we do say. So what I'm doing is helping authors to do that for themselves. And then you understand as an author, rather than me saying, okay, I'll look after it all for you. I'll write this for you. I'll go, you go away, you sit back, drink a cup of tea, and I'll sort out the publicity strategy. It's allowing authors to understand what goes into this, because you don't want to be, I say to indie authors, you don't want to be relying on other people to do this for you. There's all kinds of reasons why you wouldn't want to do that. One of them is, it is going to be, you'll have a budget restriction, you'll have restrictions of time, etc. So you want to understand how to publicize your own brand and how to build your own author brand, so that you can use the same tools and techniques again and again for all of your books. And then each time you're releasing a new book, you're building on that every time.
So how do people work with you, Isabelle? I mean, you're obviously transitioning perhaps from working, I don't know if you worked in-house at any point, but you working with the limited setup that publishing was, big trad company, queried authors and so on, to this expanding world now of more of an independent market.
Yeah.
Are you transitioning your own model?
So I've sort of transitioned from the kind of, the agency that will handle it all for you, to the model where I'm acting as, mentor / coach / personal publicist, but kind of wrapping that up. So I'm working with people one-on-one. So very much as we're talking now is how I would discuss with clients. And I take them through the exercises to first of all build that brand story, write it all up, and then help you with strategy. So whether, depending on where you are in the journey, where you are with, some people come to me because they've already self-published a book and, hasn't made any sales and they don't feel like it got them anywhere. What do they do? So sometimes we're working kind of retrospectively, and we can do that. It doesn't have to be something that's being released for the first time. With other authors, we'll often be kind of putting a strategy together for books 2, 3, 4 coming out over the next number of years. So it depends on kind of where you are at that time. But we look at whether we can get you in the press, on radio. Radio is always a kind of forgotten medium, which is actually super powerful. Podcasting, obviously, and we look at how it ties in with the marketing strategy. So with the social media, what are authors doing to market? What are they doing to form a relationship and communicate with their readers?
At its minimum, I imagine this is a powerful thing just to include in the author bios for any reader that clicks on about this author on your website or reads the blurb, the bit about you in your book. If the top line's not, which mine probably is, James lives with his 2 dogs in Cambridgeshire. If the top line is James is the son of a test pilot who never talks about it, suddenly that's a bit more intriguing. That's the sort of thing we're looking for, that connection. Yes,
exactly. And it's funny you use that example. I say to people, if your bio consists, I had one lady whose bio was, is an ex-GP and lives in Cambridgeshire. And we completely turned it around, completely turned it on its head, and actually put in her author brand story. And it gave her confidence to start speaking about her work in a way that she felt comfortable with, and stop regurgitating plots to people or saying, oh, you just, I mean, the number of authors I've worked with who first of all say, oh, you just have to read the book. You just have to read the book. No, well, people aren't going to just read the book because they're faced with thousands of options every day. So we need a bit more than, lives in Cambridgeshire, and we need a bit more than you just have to read the book.
Yeah. I've got lots of homework to do after this interview, which is not a bad thing. I know you do a bit of teaching as well. I had a quick look at your website. I'm not sure if this is still a thing, but you did. I think you had a course at some point.
Yes, so I run an online course, which is the kind of first steps to building your author brand. So going into brand story, looking at publicity, looking at marketing, and the first steps in that. And I work with people one-to-one, and I also give lots of talks and things like that. And I recently spoke at the Bournemouth Writing Festival, which was very fun. There's various ways you can work with me at the moment.
And do you mind me asking? Well, I'm going to ask, how much does it cost to work with you, to have your sort of one-on-one services to help cultivate a brand?
So at the moment, I do my brand story package, which you get 2 sessions with me, plus all the kind of written homework and line to help you with editing and so on. And that's $645 for 2 sessions, and you get your brand story, and we look at your strategy as well.
Okay, well
that's a special package.
That is within reach of most authors. And I'm going to go back to that point. I think it's worth reiterating. I can imagine quite a few authors can be quite introverted. Not every author, it's not a cliche about authors, but it is sometimes true. And they might just simply not think that who they are is relevant to them selling books. But you're firm in the opinion that it is. Yes.
It's always relevant. The thing that you think is least relevant is usually the most relevant. Talking to authors out there, I've met many authors who are scared by this, and it does sound scary at first, but I work with people in a non-scary way. I'm not going to push people. I'm not asking people to lay bare anything they don't want to, but all I'm doing is helping them to tease out their own story in a way that feels good to them, and actually they come out with a lot more confidence than they had going in, which is key.
And when you think about it, so if authors are going to go off and do what I'll do after this and sort of think about who I am, why I'm writing and so on, you may end up, as you said, with quite a few different things. How do you decide? What's your skill at looking through that and thinking, actually, this is the top line, and then sort of disregard the rest, because you can't overcomplicate this, can you? Because it's so highly individual to everybody, but essentially it's what is the biggest motivation that you have. And it could be something that started back in childhood. For a lot of people, it is, a passion or motivation that you've carried with you your whole life and then manifests in your work. That's one of the key. The reason that you're writing effectively, links into your personal life.
Yeah.
And Isabelle, I think you've done a handout for us as well to help people get started on this. So just tell us about that, and then I'll give out a link, which I've carefully just come up with.
Brilliant. So it's the top 10 tips for authors to begin building your brand. So I talk about some practical tips for things that you might need, things that you might need to put together before you can start to either pitch yourself to press or radio, or starting to organise your marketing. So it's the top 10 tips, an introduction to what you need to do.
Okay, so we'll give that away at selfpublishingformula.com/author PR, for want of a better tag, author PR, all one word. And then if you can, obviously there'll be some contact information for you on there, but do you want to tell people now how they can get hold of you or learn from you?
Yeah. So the website is buildyourbrandwithpr.com, but I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, I'm on TikTok, I'm on Facebook. I think there's another one. I can't remember what it is now. But Twitter. I'm basically on all the social media channels under my own name. Oh, Twitter as IK Publicity.
Yeah.
But I'm Isabelle Knight PR on all of the channels.
We'll have to link up on TikTok then, because I'm big into my TikTok. Isabelle, I think it's been a really intriguing chat, and my cynical side, because I was a journalist, of course, we always were cynical about PR, right? Always the dark side, and puff pieces and all the rest of it. So I can't help myself be slightly cynical about the process, but I've been totally disabused by that, by your very clear cutting through description of what or why it matters. I think it's been brilliant. So I hope other people have enjoyed this as much as I have.
Oh, thank you. I'm delighted to hear it, especially from a former journalist. So.
Yeah, I'm no longer in the news. So the cynicism's ebbed away since I left.
Yeah,
I couldn't deal with it anymore. So there you go. Isabelle, thank you so much indeed for coming on.
Thanks, James. Real pleasure. Thank you.
This is the Self-Publishing Show. There's never been a better time to be a writer.
Okay, as we mentioned in that interview, there is a very handy giveaway to get you started and writing your own author story. And you can pick that up at selfpublishingformula.com/author PR. Very, very useful. Yeah, it's whether we're comfortable with it or not, Mark. Readers are interested in us as people, and we have a story as well. If you can dig that out, crystallize it, make it simple to feed out, it helps sell your books.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's not, as I've mentioned before, PR is not something that is really there for me. But the kind of the general tenet that runs through it is, yeah, if you could find a way to tell readers about you and yourself and your story and your books, then that's important. And I've always said that even from the early days, it's important to give readers the chance to find out about you, to hear about your background and the characters you write about in your stories. Doesn't really matter how you do that. It is important to give them that sense of connection. That means that I think that they're more likely to consider you someone that they're acquainted with, not just an author. And then I think that makes it more likely that they go and buy books that follow.
Yeah, I think every time you give a bit of yourself out there through a newsletter or whatever, it just moves everybody who reads it up a chunk. So they don't really know who you are. Suddenly they'll become familiar with you. And if they're already fans of you, they become sort of friends and super fans, and that's all very helpful. But yes, that PDF again is selfpublishingformula.com/author PR. Download that and start your process of working out who you are. I'm not sure I'll tell you exactly who you are, but you can come up with a story. Right, Mark, that is it. We have much to do to get this conference up and running, so we should go off and do that. And I think that's it for now. All that remains for me to say is a goodbye from him.
And a goodbye from me. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Get show notes, the podcast archive, and free resources to boost your writing career at selfpublishingshow.com. Join our thriving Facebook group at selfpublishingshow.com/Facebook. Support the show at patreon.com/selfpublishingshow. And join us next week for more help and inspiration so that you can make your mark as a successful indie author. Publishing is changing, so get your words into the world and join the revolution with the Self-Publishing Show.